You've been marketing your product for some time now. You have been marketing your service for some time now, and you've started getting leads, and the clients are calling in. They want you to explain to them how your product or your service works. They want to understand the benefits and so on and so forth. So, a client has called you to a meeting. How do you deliver the sales presentation or the business presentation? If you like, you can call it a pitch. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this YouTube channel, Growth Spark, where we ignite, accelerate, and grow. Please remember to subscribe, to like, and to share. Today, we want to talk about a sales presentation. Better yet, call it a business presentation. Now, just to bring us to perspective, I like to liken a business presentation to the 9 o'clock prime time news, where we have three parts of the news. The first part is usually the headlines, where the person or the news anchor would tell you something like, good evening and welcome to Growth Spark TV. Among the stories that are lined up for you today include, then a number of stories are usually shown to us, basically what we should expect in the news or what stories we expect to come in the main news. So this one basically gives us an appetite to watch that particular bulletin. And most of the time, actually all of the time, they will not give us all the stories that will come in the news. They'll just highlight some few stories based on how juicy they are and how they're able to make you stick or stay glued to the screens. That is exactly the first stage, or how the first stage in a presentation would also look like, the introduction. And in the introduction in a presentation is basically where you tell your client or your audience who you are, where you're coming from, and what solution you are offering. So you introduce yourself, of course, by your names. My name is Odipo Otieno, and I am from Growth Spark, where we offer learning and development solutions. Then after introducing yourself by who you are and where you come from, now you need to talk about the solutions that you want to offer on that particular day. Remember, when we were talking about the sales triangle and we looked at the sales process, there is the first process, which was prospecting. During prospecting, qualifying and needs analysis, you already know your client by this time when you are meeting them. So even if you're offering 10 products, you have narrowed down maybe to 2 or 3 products based on the need of the client. So at the point where now you're telling the client the solutions you offer, it's not necessary that you'll probably talk about your products or the solutions in full at the introductory stage, but probably you'll just highlight that this is what this product can do for you. This is what this service will be able to do for you. This is how this solution will be able to solve your problem. Just highlights to give the customer an appetite even to listen more to your presentation. So that's the first stage of a business presentation, the introduction. If we liken it to a news bulletin, this is where we have the headlines in the news. So going back to the 9 o'clock primetime news, after the headlines, now comes the main news. So probably in the headlines, they mentioned a story in politics, they mentioned one story in business, and then they mentioned another story in sports. So now in the main news, they will start with the various political stories that are there. They'll also mention the one that they introduced in the headlines. They'll go to business, they'll go to sports, and exhaust all the stories that are there. So in a presentation, now you are at the second stage, which is now the body of your presentation or the main presentation. That's the same way, just the same way you have the main news. So in your presentation, you now want to talk to the client about the benefits of your product to them. about how your solution can solve the problem. So this is basically where you talk about the benefits. This is where you highlight some of the features of your product. This is where now you put value to your product or service so that the customer can actually tell that I'm paying for value, and the customer is able to understand in depth, or they are able to understand more about how this particular product or solution will be of value to them. Before I go any further, please remember to subscribe, like, and share. We are here at Growth Spark. We ignite, accelerate, and grow. Now, there are two types of presentations. When we come now to the main presentation, there are two types of presentation. There's a classroom presentation and a one-on-one presentation, where in sales we call it belly-to-belly presentation. So you might have been called to a presentation or to a sales presentation where you are talking to a group of employees. The HR has called employees or the staff of that particular company to come and sit in a hall or in a boardroom. Now you want to talk to them as a whole. That's a classroom presentation. Then there's the other one where it is just one-on-one. It is one client that you are facing. That is a belly-to-belly presentation. In both presentations, one thing is common. A sales or a business presentation always resonates well when it is done in form of a narrative, when it is done in form of a story, right? You don't go to a client, for example, let me use an example of, let's say, an IT salesperson, and you're selling a laptop or a phone, for example, and you come to me. Personally, I don't have a background in IT or anything, or computer hardware and software. So you come to a client like me who has no background, and you start talking jargon, IT jargon. This camera is a 5-core I don't know, those things, quad core. You understand those things if you're an IT person. So as a person who is a client who is interested to consume your product, but I do not have the background of IT, I might get lost. So you probably could tell me something like, I know I've seen your YouTube channel, and I know this phone would be good for you to shoot your content because the camera is like this, like that, the battery is long lasting, the clarity is good, you can actually edit within your camera, you don't have to go to your machine. So I can easily resonate when I hear such preposition in your presentation when you're selling to me a phone, as opposed to saying all those jargon that I have mentioned. So it has to be a narrative. It has to be a narrative. I remember when we used to sell life insurance. I used to sell life insurance at some point, and one of the products in life insurance was the education plan or education policy, where you'd sell to a client the idea of saving for their child's education, so that in the event that they lose income, they are unable to raise income to pay school fees for their kids, this insurance education plan would come in handy. But we never used to go directly to the client and just talk insurance jargon, premiums, or things to do with the sum assured or maturity, those kind of technical insurance words. We would do it as a form of narrative. For example, I'd tell a client, what's the name of your kid? So they give me the name of the child. So when I'm presenting, I'm actually mentioning the child by their name. And every time, let's assume this child is called Edward. So I'd go something like, picture Edward finishing the primary school, and now they're just about to join high school. How would that make you feel as a parent? You've seen your child since they were born up to the day they finish their primary school, and now they want to join high school. Then I'd continue and say that something like, I'm sure you'd want Edward to go into a good school. But as we know, anything can happen in between. Right now, when assuming Edward was 5 years old, right now when Edward is 5 years old, and by the time they get to primary, waiting to join high school, anything can happen. The economy is not very predictable lately, so if you do not have a solid education plan for Edward, then Edward might turn out to be something or someone that you did not plan for. So you don't want to get yourself in a situation whereby Edward needs to go to high school. You don't have money to take Edward to a good high school, so you take Edward to a random school. Maybe that random school teaches Edward some ill behaviors in the society, and Edward turns out. So the client is able to see from that angle of their child how the product will solve that problem that might occur in the event that they do not have any money to pay for school fees. That's why I'm saying a sales presentation, a business presentation comes out as a narrative. Even when I'm assuming you're going to buy property, and the salesperson is walking you through the property, assuming it's an apartment, they will show you the living room. They'll probably tell you that this living room has large windows for air, for lighting. If you're a lady, they probably focus more on the kitchen, and they'll tell you more about the kitchen and how you can place your fridge, your cooker. They'll even probably talk to you, if you're a lady, about the bedroom. They'll lay emphasis. They'll not tell you that this house was built by this kind of stone or this, those jargon for constructions. I don't understand them, but my point is the narrative is what draws the customer to like the product that you are selling. The narrative is what draws the customer to like the product or service that you're offering. If there is no narrative, chances of this client buying from you, the chances are going to be very, very, very low. So at the end of the day, what we are trying to say is that sales is basically an emotional game. Sales is an emotional game. How you appeal to the emotions of your client will definitely determine whether they'll buy your product or not. So it is important to use a narrative. Maybe just one last example. If you're going to buy a car, for example, and you walk into a car dealership, they might not necessarily, unless you ask, they might not necessarily go into the technicalities of the car, trying to describe the mechanisms of the engine, how it works, and so on and so forth. But they will tell you things to do with the comfort of the car. They'll tell you things to do with the consumption of the car, if it is fuel efficient. They will tell you things that are appealing to you, things like this car has a sunroof, this car has leather seats, such things. Unless now you want to understand how the engine operates, the horsepower and all those things, what have you, Titronic gears, DSG gears, and so on and so forth. Unless you are such, they will never tell you that, because sales is an emotional game. So while you're doing the presentation, you want to bring out the narrative. Once the customer is within that space and they are saying, this house has a spacious kitchen, this house has a spacious compound, this car actually has a sunroof, this car is fuel efficient, maybe it is hybrid, then at that point is now when you might need to mention a benefit or two the product that you're selling. Then when you're doing a presentation also, in another video I say that as a salesperson, you need to be in charge of your conversation. You don't let the cat fully out of the bag. You leave part of the cat inside the bag. You don't exhaust everything that you need to present to this client. You leave something else to be desired. I normally tell salespeople and business people that a business presentation or a sales presentation should be as brief as a mini skirt. Should be as brief as a mini skirt. It is short enough to cover the most important parts of your presentation or of your product. A sales presentation should be as brief or as short as a mini skirt. Why? Short enough to cover the most important parts of your product. Take that, note that. So at the end of the day, you need to leave enough for the client to desire. So once you're done with this main presentation, factoring all that we've just discussed, now you go into a place where the third stage, where you probably do a summary of what you have told the client, right? So you've done a narrative, you've explained one or two features of the product, you've even done the value proposition of the product. Now you want to summarize. So you tell the client something like, now if you have this car, if you have this property, if you have this product, this is exactly what it will be able to solve for you, and maybe for a particular period of time, or if you use it, this is exactly what the output that you're going to get. Once you do that summary, in the other side of the news bullet, they usually call it a recap of the top stories. And it goes something like, in case you're joining us right now, this is Growth TV. Some of the top stories we had lined up for you are as follows. So they give you a summary of what the top stories were, so that even if you joined the broadcast at that particular time, you can still catch up with the news. So the same thing applies on this other side of the presentation, where you do the summary, so that this person can now actually get the selling points of your product. Once you do the summary, the last stage is now the question and answer stage, the Q&A. In a news bulletin, this would be now the feedback time, where probably they'd go something like, we had asked you on the big question that what do you think about X, Y, and Z, and we had asked you to communicate your answer through this number 292 or 293, whatever number. Then the news anchor goes and reads the feedback that the audience has or have given. The same thing now applies to this side when you're doing the question and answer, the last stage in your presentation. So you want to ask the client if they have any questions for you. This part is usually a bit tricky. If you forget to be in charge of your sales or business presentation, the client can overcome you at this point where you've allowed them to ask you question and answer. How do you become in charge in this particular stage? You'd probably do something like, if it is a classroom presentation where you have 20, 30, so many people, you'd probably tell them, right now I'll give you 2 or 3 chances to ask me any question in case you didn't understand anything. So you've closed it at 2 or 3 chances, such that you don't just open it up for everyone to ask you. When we were selling life insurance, this used to happen a lot, where you go and present to a group of people, and inside those people there are people who have had very bad experiences with the product, with the insurance, and they would spoil other people who are almost buying. That's why you need to control that and tell them, I'll give us 2 or 3 opportunities or chances for you guys to ask me questions. So after the third question has been asked, you probably could tell them something that, I'm still within the building, still within your offices. Your HR, your manager has been gracious enough to give me a table, so you can come to our table so that we discuss more about these products, and probably even personalize the product for you, so that you avoid other people who might come and destroy the people or your presentation, because there are some people probably who are ready to buy, but because other people had bad experiences, they might actually spoil for everyone. If it is a one-on-one, you probably want to ask the client, is there anywhere or anything that you did not understand or was not clear about this product? So they are able to point out 1 or 2 areas that they didn't understand. So remember, in the main presentation, because you didn't let the full cat out of the bag, you still have content to engage this client. One of the best ways to engage a client when you're doing a presentation or a pitch to them is to have them ask you questions, so that it builds up what you are talking about, and also it narrows you down to the exact need that the client is actually looking for. So ladies and gentlemen, those are the 4 stages in a sales presentation or business presentation: the introduction, the main presentation, the summary, and the Q&A. Please don't forget to subscribe. Please don't forget to like. Don't forget to share with your networks. Thank you so much. This is Growth Spark, where we ignite, we accelerate, and grow together.